My name is Bokleman. I was trained by the U.S. Army as a launch area technician, electronics technician. I worked on Nike Hercules batteries for 2¼ years in Europe in the late 60s. I was also trained as a systems analyst to analyze and to troubleshoot and fix any problems that would occur in the launch area. Also worked in IFC, which is integrated fire control, on that site for about 7 months while I was on site. I worked for Honeywell here in Seattle for 2 years, making nuclear tip torpedoes, smart torpedoes. They're technicians and operators dealing with the really high-speed, very mobile targets, because what they're looking at in the IFC are basically electronic representations of what the radar is tracking. So I heard a number of those from young operators and older operators also, and they were stationed at different places around the world. Integrated fire control is where the radars were stationed in relation to the missiles. And it's a whole bunch of radars. There's a high power, there's low power target tracking and missile tracking. And they would recount stories where vehicles would come into the high power, and they would track them and pass them off, and they would be going, say, 700 miles an hour and accelerate to 3,500 miles an hour in the atmosphere quite rapidly. I mean, it was off the scale in terms of what the technology for our or potential targets, Russian targets, were. It was off the scale. They are trained to determine the difference between radar strikes and any atmospheric disturbances that can approximate targets. They're experts at it. So when they were tracking targets, they were tracking actual physical objects in the atmosphere. They were 100% convinced that they were physical targets that were in the atmosphere and were involved in a variety of different types of travel. That was in the late 60s that I was hearing the reports. The reports went back into the 50s because a lot of the older operators had been on Ajax sites, Nike Ajax sites, and they were tracking them, and primarily the reports that I got were from the United States. They were in the United States. The military official position is completely opposite of what people who operate very sophisticated radar systems routinely perceive. If there was a large event, they would give you specific orders to not disclose to anybody ever. And one evening I was sitting in my living room, and it was in October of 1978, and I had all the lights off, and I was just sitting there just letting my mind wander, and quite abruptly, all of a sudden, 4 amber lights started shining in the room and filling it with diffuse amber light. And needless to say, I turned around quite rapidly to determine what it was that I was seeing. And there were 3 lights that were approximately equidistant from each other, and a 4th one off of the equidistant spacing a little bit, but in the same plane. Anyway, after I saw this object, this jet came from the west, due west, and I'm very well oriented, while I was standing on the back porch of my house, and attacked and fired a missile, an air defense missile. As it turned out, it was a high explosive missile right at the target. And one of the things that I was doing outside of observing it is trying to ascertain approximately how far it was away from me. Well, as soon as the jet launched the missile, because my experience in air defense, and I know that we have air-to-air missiles that have nuclear warheads, I ducked behind my back porch so that I wouldn't get blasted with the alpha and beta particles, because they blind you and they burn you horribly. And I ducked behind it, waited for a period of time. There was no nuclear explosion. So I went so I could view the object again. Shrapnel was falling to the ground. It had exploded, and the object was accelerating away at a mind-boggling speed away from where the transaction occurred. This event occurred, the actual attack on the craft occurred about 10 miles east of Cedar Woolley. I'd say about 3 miles north of the area called Lyman Hamilton. It's on the Skagit River in northwest Washington state. Outside of the speed, the thing that was most impressive about these targets is their capacity to have abrupt turns. People who are in air defense look at mass and turning radius. Well, we had nothing that was capable of matching their capacity for minuscule turning radiuses. I mean, we're talking about virtually no radius turns at high speeds, 2,000 miles an hour, right angle turn. Just not only turns, but descents and ascents, where they would descend rapidly. It didn't seem to make any difference to them where, in which direction they went. At 11:14 in '98, November 14th, '98, I was sitting in my front room again. Only this time I was watching a movie. Lights were off in my house. My estimates were it was approximately a mile across, 1,100 feet thick, moving approximately 600 miles an hour without sound. I did get a very, very clear view of its shape because that evening was a light frost. It was clear, the moon was out, could see its shape very well. There were hundreds of lights on it.
What shape was it?
It was roughly triangular shape, a little bit of a truncated triangular shape, because at the back side, it wasn't perfectly. It was like a triangle. It's kind of cut off, and I could see the sides of it. There were rows of lights going up the sides. There were rows of lights going around the perimeter. There were rows of lights going across the bottom. I called my kids that lived in Cedar Woolley, in town, after I saw a number of silent jets come from the south in single file at 4-minute intervals and fly through the flight path. Jets were so quiet you almost can't hear them on tapes. I'd never seen the model of jets, and I'm pretty good at identifying, just particularly military jets. They normally, when they're flying in our area, they fly from west to east on the Cultus Ridge, which is where they were supposed to fly. These flew from directly from south to north. When they moved through the flight path of the object, after they moved through it, they would take an immediate, really hard left and head westward. Then they went on a dog leg, and when they got over Cedar Woolley, and headed north. So I don't know where they were going. The second jet I filmed, when he was flying through the flight path of the object, turned on a bright light. I can only imagine what the purpose of it was. But 4 different jets came at 4-minute intervals, all in exact flight, same pattern, same exact flight pattern.